the case of Elon Musk, what's interesting is that he's become a trillionaire and he does not take a salary at all. This is a place where people's dreams go to die.
Wealth can mean very different things for very many different people.
Yeah.
Do you feel wealthy?
Until I realized that, because they told me, I didn't really feel impoverished.
Did that change your relationship with money?
And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's incomplete.
How did you transition yourself from science to business?
Hi, I'm Erika Welch. I'm a Japanese Canadian living in Dubai, and this is Bright Futures.
Hi, Erika. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow, where to start? Like I said, I'm Japanese Canadian. I moved out here to Dubai 16 years ago and to the Middle East 18 years ago. So just after the financial crisis, the global financial crisis. I like to say I'm a recovering strategy consultant, and I'm a tech entrepreneur and a dog mom.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I describe myself these days. I just recently turned 40, and I'm coming to realize
Congratulations. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you, right? That milestone. It does feel like a bit of a milestone, and I've really entered middle life. And so that's interesting to me. And one of the interesting things I've found at that is, especially in a place like Dubai, but in general, I think at 40, you start recognizing how multidimensional you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in a work context, you might only introduce yourself as like your role in the company you're representing. But at my age, most of us have multiple side businesses and projects and passions that we're pursuing. And so I find that question about introducing yourself quite hard.
Absolutely. So why don't we start all the way from the beginning? Sure. Where were you born? Where were you raised?
Sure. So I was born in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada on the West Coast, to my Japanese mom and my very Canadian dad. And my mom was a teacher, high school teacher. She actually taught Japanese. And my father is a marine biologist and a scientist to this day. He's a diehard researcher. What was interesting about my upbringing in Canada was that I didn't learn English until I was 5. My dad actually ended up learning Japanese because my parents met at grad school in Canada and then moved to Japan for my dad to learn Japanese and that culture before my mom would agree to marrying him.
No way. Wow.
And so once they got married, they moved back to Canada. They had my older sister. They had me. And surprisingly, we were twins. So I have a twin brother as well. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started the show. But what was interesting about my upbringing was that in our house, we were only allowed to speak Japanese. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't enforced by my mom. It was actually enforced by my dad, who was like, I just spent 3 years perfecting my Japanese. And he speaks like way better than me, like really eloquently. He really learned it properly, but he speaks with like a Gaijin accent, which I only learned until like later in life. Like in my 20s, I was like, I heard him after many, many years. We'd switched to English, I think, like in high school. And then I heard him speak Japanese in my 20s, and I was like, oh, my dad has a Gaijin accent, So that was interesting, and started learning English when I was like probably 5 or 6.
And how did he enforce you guys to speak Japanese at home?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was like, I don't think we had an allowance when we were that young, but at some point my dad instituted, especially after we started to go to school, right? So when we were like 7, 8, and all of our friends were English, we literally did not have a single Japanese friend. We went to Japanese schools on Saturday, but it was literally like pulling teeth. Like we really didn't want to go. And so we weren't really motivated. And my dad, I think what might have been the reason why he instituted an allowance, which was a very Canadian thing to do. If you made your bed, if you washed the dishes, if you did all of your chores, and if you didn't speak English in the house that week, you might make like $5.
$5.
And
1 loonies and 2 toonies, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, the toonies came later. Okay. I remember that shift, but yeah, I do remember my dad being like, allowance in the jar, and we had an English jar. Like a lot of houses had like swear jars if you use a swear word, but it was like a lot more corporal punishment if you spoke English in the house.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, in the sense that he's also like trying to teach you guys the value of keeping your heritage.
Yeah. I mean, I had so many teachers tell me, oh, Erika, you're so lucky that you're multilingual.
Yeah.
And I think when you're growing up, you just want to fit in, and you're like, why am I lucky? I don't get it, you know? And later in life, I learned from my mother that actually when they moved to Canada, you know, my mom's like decision was like, okay, we're in Canada now, let's raise the kids in English. And it was really my dad that was like, no way. And I think it was because he worked so hard, but also I think he really did think it was a leg up for us to grow up with both. But I can't imagine like it being something else now, because when I go, my mom's moved back to Japan for over 20 years now, but whenever I'm in Japan with her, if she's like too tired, like we switch between English and Japanese very easily. And if she's too tired, she'll just be like, let's switch to Japanese. Like I can't process English right now. And I'm like, Mom, you were the one that wanted to have kids that would only speak English. Yeah. And so I thought that was really funny. And my favorite person on the earth was my mother's mother, my grandmother, my Japanese maternal grandmother. And she didn't speak any English. And so if I didn't speak Japanese, I wouldn't have had a relationship with her. And the thought of that really breaks my heart.
Absolutely. Especially growing up with both culture as, you know, as a Japanese and as a Canadian, what financial beliefs did you have or attitudes while growing up?
Gosh, that's like a really tough question. You know, Canada is a really interesting place. Like taxes are high, right? But and I know this now because I've lived in so many countries or worked in so many different countries around the world, and I have friends from all over the world. But if you wanted to do something in Canada, it was affordable. Like I know in Singapore, for example, or in Japan, for example, if you wanted to take piano lessons or violin lessons or go to ballet, that was like often out of reach for people. But in Canada, if you wanted to go to a ballet academy, it wasn't as out of reach. And so I think my parents really protected us. When we were young, we were very, very poor. My dad hates me talking about this, but we were super poor. Like he was a PhD postdoctoral student when they had my sister. And then with us, he was just like the starting out scientist. And my mom, as you know, teachers do not get paid what they should get paid. She still doesn't. She's still in her mid-70s, and she's a teacher in Japan part-time, and she still doesn't get paid. I'm like, wow, that's how much you make? So it wasn't like a high-income household at all until it was. But at some point, I do remember us moving to a really beautiful ocean view house, and we were very comfortable middle class. But my parents also split up then, around the time I was like 12 or 13. And it was around the time that we were getting more financially comfortable. And I really did have this belief that no one implanted in me, but as a child, I made some sort of like reference to like, oh, if you have more money, then maybe it's really hard to maintain relationships. Sure. And so that was something later in life that I had to rewire with a therapist.
Sure. And as a young Japanese Canadian, what does success look like to you at the age of 18, for example?
At the age of 18, I was already at McGill going to college, but it was very clear to me. Like I was a very ambitious kid, and I cannot tell you where that came from. Like I was just like an athlete. I went to McGill, as I said, for basketball. I was obsessed about, you know, being like the best basketball player ever. I was really a good student because I had a tiger mom. And when I say good student, like my sister was a great student. Like she would get 100%. But I was like the student that was practical. I was like...
Were you straight A students?
I was a straight A student,
Nice.
but
Yeah.
I will say like my sister was 100% straight A student. Like she had 99% and 100.
Okay.
And I would come home and I'd be like, Mom, look, I got 89% A, you know?
Yeah.
And my mom would be like, what happened? And I'd be like, what do you mean what happened? This is an A. And I'd be like... And she'd be like, yeah, but what happened? Why didn't you get 100%? And it was such an Asian way of thinking about things, right? But I don't know if it was like the Canadian in me, but I was like, listen, I got an A that's the same A as 100% or 89%. And if I can get an A at 89%, that's good enough for me. And so I also had that kind of mentality. I wasn't like crazy. I saw how hard my sister studied for those 99, 100%. And I was just thought, what a waste. Like, there's got to be diminishing returns at some point if that A and this A has got to be the same, you know?
Were those your exact words? Diminishing
No, I didn't
return?
know what diminishing returns were, but it was very obvious to me that, like, I'll put it in context. I was obsessed. Like, I had a lot of passions when I was young, right?
Yeah.
So I was really, like, I liked dancing a lot at some point, but I loved basketball. I used to call it my first marriage. Like, I really felt married to it.
What position did you play?
I was point guard in, you know, my whole upbringing, and I was always the captain of the team.
Nice.
And then when I went to McGill, they moved me to shooting guard, and I just did not understand the game from that position. It was really humbling. And I got cut in my second year, and a rookie took my spot. So it was a very humbling experience. But I was obsessed with it. I think from the age of 14, I started practicing with the local college team. Like, I was, you know, looking for scouts at that age and whatnot. And my mom being very Japanese, and my dad was not very athletic at all. So they really didn't understand. My twin brother was also very obsessed with being a sportsman. And we played volleyball, soccer, everything. We were the athletes in the family. And they really didn't understand this interest in this. They were like, this doesn't make sense. You're spending so much time playing sports. You should focus on your school studies. And so at some point when my mom and dad really figured out that they're never going to pull us out of sports, like we were like locked in, they again incentivized it. So they literally just said, okay, you have to get straight A's. The moment your grades drop, I'm pulling you off the team. And I think that's why I got straight A's. Like, honestly, if I didn't have that incentive, I think I would have been comfortable with a B or B+.
That's a very. I grew up. A part of my life, I was in Canada, but I spent a lot of time in the U.S. But I can attest to that. I think that's a very North American thing. You gotta get good grades to play sports.
Is it? Like there were some, well, yeah, maybe. Well, it's a very Canadian thing for sure, because in Canada, it's very different from the U.S. Like in the U.S., if you're an all-star and you are really sucking at your academics in high school, but you are like all-American material,
you still have to pass.
A university will pick you up. And they will give you tutors. They'll like support you through that process.
Sure.
Right? There's all of these ways to do that.
Yeah.
It was very clear to me when I was like, okay, I guess I was looking at U.S. schools as well, but McGill came across my radar, and they were like, listen, you're going to have to get in on your own merit, and then we decide whether you get on the team. If you don't get in, if you don't have a strong enough GPA to get in, then you're out of luck. So the Canadian system and the NCAA U.S. system are slightly different in that way. Like in Canada, if you want to play sports, you have to have good academics to play for a good university.
Gotcha. And what did you study in college?
I ended up in the Bachelor of Science program, pre-med neuropsychology and neuroscience at the time, but it was really heavy psychology courses. And the reason why I went Bachelor of Science, I was interested in biology and all of these things, but I really didn't think I would end up a doctor or scientist or anything. I was pretty clear I wanted to be in business, even though I didn't know what that meant. Sure. There was no one in my family that was in business that I could like relate to or talk to about it. But I just really loved the idea of like working for a company or like marketing commercials, or I don't know, there was all these ideas about building organizations that I was like, that would be really cool. But when it came time to apply for McGill for the basketball team, I had missed the cutoff for business school. And so I ended up applying for like the only one school that was still open, and that was the Bachelor of Science pre-med program.
Nice. Did you pick up French while you were in Quebec?
I did, actually. My second year or third year, my third year of college, I fell madly in love with a Quebecois who came from like a really tiny town, like an hour and a half or 2 hours outside of Montreal. It was like a town of 1,000 people, and his parents didn't really speak English. They had no reason to. And after a few months of us dating, they started to learn English at, probably at the time, they were probably in their 50s, I guess. And I was like, these guys learning English for me, wow, this is ridiculous. And so I was like, okay, I need to take this seriously. And I enrolled myself in a Francisation program, and I started studying like 30, 40 hours a week. And that was probably the first time when I really was trying to become fluent in French that I started to have this huge appreciation for the fact that around that same age, my father learned Japanese to a proficient enough level to raise his kids in a foreign language.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say you speak at least 3 languages?
I would say 2.5.
2.5?
Yeah, because I've lost a little bit of French over time, and Japanese I speak fluently, but you probably know there's keigo, which is like the business, really professional kind that you speak in boardrooms.
Sure.
And as my clients all like to call me, they're like, oh, you're like our little granddaughter or daughter, because I speak to them like I would speak to them like an uncle or a grandfather across the table,
More casual.
Very casual. And they're like, it's okay, you get away with it because you're a halfie. Yeah, so it's come in handy in my business life as well.
Interesting. So walk us through, how did you transition yourself from science to business?
Yeah, I think it was very clear to me, first year of sciences at McGill. It's a very famous school for medical school.
Sure.
And so, there were many professors in my first year that would ask, like, how many of you guys want to be doctors? And like literally all 900 students would raise their hand, and I would be like, I don't. And it was very clear. And I started taking some of like the basic, lab courses, and I was like, I do not want to be in a white coat doing research, where people are like reading cue cards and shaking while they're talking to you. Like, at the time, I thought I wanted to be in international development. Like, that's where all the cool kids were. They were all like very free and studying like history and art and all these things, and sort of like world history and international development. I just really wanted to do good, and I thought that would be a cool place to start. So I went to Bronfman, which was the business school at McGill, and I said, hey, I want to transfer. I'm a pretty good science student. I think I should go. And they're like, oh, no, you will have to repeat your first year in order to transfer to do your business degree. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to be at college for more than 4 years. And so I talked to a bunch of the girls that I played basketball with, and one of them had done a minor in business and economics. And so that's how I first got into it. When I got cut from the basketball team, I also got involved with a bunch of leadership organizations, and I just really wanted to do an internship in a company. And there was one organization called ISEC that I just fell into, and the whole premise of it was, okay, you get to go on an international internship if you can sell an international internship to a local company for an international student to come and work at for 3-4 months to 18 months.
Nice.
And as I was doing business for this small NGO, I just loved it. I was in sales, I was in fundraising, I was building teams. It was all about leadership and doing cool, big things, doing conferences with a small number of people having a vision and making it happen. And I just thought, this is so practical. This is very cool. So that's how I got into it. I ended up becoming president of this organization, ended up actually working for them after graduation as well. And so one thing led to another, and I did an internship in West Africa. Thought that would be a good exposure for me to see if I wanted to do international development work, started working with the UN, and it really made me realize, like, I do not want to work for the United Nations.
Why is that?
At the time, I was in Togo, which was the most, and I think it still might be, it's definitely the world's least happiest country, according to the UN Happiness Index, and it is one of the most impoverished countries in the world. And I met a bunch of UN agencies. I was working on an HIV/AIDS anti-stigmatization project, and we were recruiting teachers in public health that had a master's in public health to come do an internship for 3-4 months to educate young students about sex ed. And this was in 2006. This was the Bush era.
Sure.
And I realized that, depending on who the president of the US is, the entire United Nations policy shifts. So they said, we love the initiative. We definitely need it in this country. HIV/AIDS rates were prevalent. There wasn't a huge remedy for it at the time, like there is now. And they're like, but we can't fund this because you guys are giving sex education. And there's a Republican in office in the US, and so the only thing you guys can educate on is abstinence. And we're like, yeah, but like that doesn't work. Like the data shows it doesn't work. We need to show kids and educate them about safe sex practices. And that was one side. The other side was I was meeting all of these UN workers working in Togo. Like, this was a place where if you said, Erika, I'm going to give you $50, you go spend it on anything you want today. Your only caveat is that you have to spend it in the next 10 hours. I wouldn't be able, it would be very difficult for me to spend that $50. Like, it was so cheap. Like a motorbike taxi ride across the city was like 10 cents. Mm-hmm. You know, so if you think about that, like trying to spend it on meals and all of these things, it was like you would have to get a little ridiculous to spend that. In that context, the UN workers, because at the time it was just after a civil war had broken out in Togo, there was sort of danger pay for UN workers that would come in and go check on different NGOs, and they were getting paid $500 a day above their salary for a per diem. And I thought, I just need a couple $1,000s, guys, for this HIV/AIDS project. And when I saw that, I guess I kind of realized, like, the system's not working. Like, the money is going to the wrong places. And everyone, I won't say everyone, because I definitely know people who still work for different UN agencies that are very happy, but they're in very senior leadership positions. Most of them, even some of the advisors to Kofi Annan at the time, I was lucky enough to know in Canada, and they sat me down and was like, Erika, if you have any ounce of ambition, and I can tell that you do, and you want to do something meaningful with your life, do not go into the UN. This is a place where people's dreams go to die.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that coming from someone who was the direct advisor to Kofi Annan for the WHO, I was like, wow, that's tough, you know. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah. He's like, I won't, kill it, because my wife and I have had a really great life. But if you look inside the organization, the majority of people are penning a book about their life and their experiences that only their mothers will read. And you deserve to do something bigger than that.
How did you feel?
My mom recalls that she had never seen me so depressed in my life. Like, I came back from that experience. I had also caught malaria, and there was a whole sort of culture shock as well, and a reverse culture shock coming back to Canada. It was hard for me to take, like, more than a 5-minute long shower, and I would be, like, turning off the tap all the time. Like, it really changed me. It really just made me realize, like, how unequal the world was. And even this idea of, like, just because I was born with a Canadian passport, I could travel the world. Meanwhile, I was trying to get one of the Togolese to come on an internship to Montreal to get work experience. And it was so many hoops for him to get that visa. And I just thought, wow, the world is really unfair. So it was the first time I really also recognized how much disparity there was in the world. And I was maybe even borderline clinically depressed, although I never went to a therapist at the time, for a good 8 to 12 months after that experience.
Did that change your relationship with money?
Yeah, like I never bought a can of Coke again. Such a weird thing to say, but
Why that?
Yeah, it's funny because you might see Melinda Gates from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation talk about how Coca-Cola is an amazing logistics story in Africa because they're able to get this can of Coke to the most remote parts of the jungle and to villages that medicines are hard to get to. And they basically were like, let's follow the Coca-Cola method to get these vaccines and medicines into parts of Africa that are really hard to get to. And I thought about that, and I thought, wow, I am in the middle, like near the border between like Togo and Burkina Faso. Really tough for us. Like, it took us hours and hours by bus to get there from Lomé, which was the capital of Togo. It's this tiny little place that, like, this is a place where at the time I would ask people, like, is there a place I can get a burger? And they didn't know what that was, right? And I was like, do you guys know what McDonald's is? Starbucks? And you know, like a 19-year-old kid. They didn't know. This is one of the few untouched places that were like, what is McDonald's? You know, like no idea. And I was like, wow, interesting. Yet Coca-Cola, they knew what Coca-Cola was because it was there in like the tiniest little villages. And guess how much that can of Coca-Cola costs?
2 cents.
Yeah, probably barely. I can't remember exactly, but it was around that, somewhere around 2 to 5 cents. And I was like, how the heck does a can of Coke that's been flown out here, there, whatever, just think about like the logistics of getting this can of Coke in the middle of this jungle cost 5 cents and they're making money off of it?
Sure.
And back home, we were paying $1.25. I don't know how much they are now, but I've seen them at airports for like $3. No way. Like the idea that I could be paying 5 cents and Coca-Cola could still be making money off of it. And I don't know if that's true. Maybe they were like, this is the lost market, but I doubt it, right? That was when I was like, oh, I'm not going to spend on this. And it was a great health decision anyway.
Sure. I think you get a little bit more from recycling the can or the bottle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Canada, for sure. Yeah.
For sure.
So like, it made, and I was not a wealthy student at all. I was a student. So like it wasn't like I could change a lot about my spending or my idea around money, but it did make me feel guilty. It made me feel like the amount that I had as a student was enough to raise a family of 7 in Togo, right? So I was staying at a homestay, and I did work before I left on this internship, and I did say, okay, actually, thank you for taking me on this homestay. They were just kind. They did it out of the goodness of their heart. And I said, I will pitch in for groceries. I can pitch in like, a couple of bucks. So take me with you when we go grocery shopping. And that was a whole experience by itself. But at the time, back in 2006, I could go with the mother of this family into this, like the city market, like an open air market with butchers and fruit stalls and everything. And I could feed the whole family for a week. This is a family of 7, 8, including myself. And it was like probably $20 a month, $20 a week.
Oh, wow.
$20 a week. And that was when I realized like, oh, that's crazy, And when I think I went into a little bit of cognitive dissonance. Like my brain could not really process and compute that was a reality somewhere that I could just jump on a plane on this earth and go to. Meanwhile, back home in Montreal, which was not at all an expensive city compared to like Toronto or Vancouver at the time, to like my friends in Togo, I would have been like this rich millionaire or something, in comparison.
Sure.
And that was hard for me to swallow.
I can only imagine. Last week, we finally had our first trillionaire, right?
Right. Elon Musk,
that was hard for me to process.
Right.
And I can only imagine,
Yeah.
And what's next? What happened after you returned to Canada?
After that, I think I started to look for like, okay, then if I'm not going to go into international development, what am I going to do? And I wanted to go into business. I thought, but I wasn't sure. And I remember talking to a few people like, why do you want to go into business? What's, all the B school kids, right? And I mean, they weren't all like this. I had wonderful friends who had really beautiful visions for their lives, but a good chunk of them were like, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. That was a very common answer.
Sure, sure.
And I was sickened to my stomach by this answer. Like, this was not like motivational at all for me. And I thought, God, maybe I'm not meant to do business. It seems like a lot of people who just want to make money. But then I came across a couple of things. So something that interested me was intercultural business, and that's just my passion of different cultures and me being a bicultural kid, I think. I really loved learning about how different it was for a Japanese person to do business and Americans to do business and why those don't work out. Those M&A mergers don't work out. Just like those marriages, like in my parents' case, don't often work out. And it's just because the cultural differences are so extreme, right? And then like really understanding like how do you manage those, because sometimes those mergers need to happen, and what do you need to do in order to facilitate those things. So again, coming from like the psychology point of view, I was super interested in that. The other thing I was really interested in business school was corporate social responsibility, CSR. It was becoming a hot topic. Sustainability was becoming a hot topic. And I just had like 1 or 2 classes on it, and I was just fascinated. It's like, okay, these big companies, mining or aviation or Nike, what are they doing where they have a lot of resources at hand? They're providing a lot of jobs. They're obviously doing a lot of economic good, but they also have a lot of like social and environmental impacts that are negative as well. So if we go back to like Coca-Cola, for example, many of these Coca-Cola plants were being developed on, like in India, for example, where water was scarce. And instead of using water to create clean water, they were turning it into Coca-Cola, or some of the InBev was creating, beers and alcohol. The whole idea was, let's start thinking about business differently, where we're not just thinking about bringing shareholder returns as like the only metric. So where we are now with capitalism, right? But really thinking about the integrated management of environmental, social, and economic performance together. And I loved that concept. It felt like, okay, is there a way that I can work with companies in order for me to figure out how we can create social good and minimize environmental impacts while creating profit and prosperity for people? And that was the direction that I went.
Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, I do think it's possible, but I would say that the system is still rigged, that it doesn't incentivize that. And unfortunately, I think as I think to my childhood, like I spoke Japanese in the house because I was incentivized not to. I got good grades because I was incentivized to speak Japanese, right? I was incentivized to get good grades because I really wanted to play basketball, and those were the incentives my parents set out for me. The world currently is still heavily incentivized towards creating shareholder profits and profitability, right? In general, like it's really financially oriented. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's incomplete. And it would be great if there were more mechanisms that would go, okay, yes, profit is important because we can't have bankrupt companies, but we also should educate business leaders to be conscious business leaders and go, what are the impacts of me in terms of running this business? Sure. Is it a sustainable business that I can build for like 100 or 200 years from now? When you look at the history, businesses originally, when they were first created, like this is hundreds and thousands of years ago, they were meant for social good. Like these tiny little merchants and things, they would bring in products into villages that people, the society needed around them. Like it was meant to, okay, we need a hospital, we need this. It was meant at the people at the center, at society at the center. And that's not the case anymore. Now it's, if you take that lens off and go, is this good for the city, the country, the people? If you take that lens off and go, does it create shareholder returns? And that's your only metric that you're really driving people on, then you're going to have, deforestation, you're going to have overfishing, you're going to have depletion of minerals using, monocrops and pesticides on our food, and you're going to get a lot of these effects that we see now in our world, and it all comes down to that, I think.
This is a very, very interesting topic, and before we dive deeper into that, I have prepared some questions for you to do a rapid fire round.
Sure.
If you're ready.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say 2 words, and you're going to tell me which one of these 2 words, you cannot pick both,
Yeah.
cannot cheat, matters to you the most or resonate with you the most.
Okay.
Okay. Security or autonomy?
Autonomy.
Guidance or opportunities?
Opportunities.
Wealth or network?
Wealth or network?
Correct.
Network.
Profit or purpose?
Purpose.
Reputation or results?
Reputation.
Growth or balance?
Growth.
Give or take?
Give.
And I want to add one more
Yeah.
just for the conversation.
Yeah.
Capitalism or socialism?
I think I remember Googling again what socialism really stood for like a few weeks ago, and I've already
It has
kind of
changed
forgot
over
it.
time.
Yeah. Listen, that's a hard. I would say social capitalism.
Social capitalism.
I'm not anti-capitalist. I wouldn't be living in Dubai if I wasn't. I also run my own businesses. I really believe in the free market, and I believe in shattering all the ceilings. And if you want to make as much wealth as you want, great. But I also think, like from a personal and positive psychology point of view, they do very clearly say, like, I would say, what's the purpose of life, right? To me, the purpose of life is, well, for me, it's happiness. It's eudaimonia. I'd like to say I'm a eudaimonia seeker. And what that means is eudaimonia is the pursuit of life lived meaningfully well. And what does meaningfully well mean to people, right? And for me, it's like the things that bring you happiness. And they have done study after study about how much money do people need in order to be happy. And generally speaking, again, it depends on what country you're in, but let's say you're in North America. And I would say this is probably attributable to most of the world. They say after $80,000 US, there's only a very slight marginal difference. And I would say, okay, let's raise that to, you're extra ambitious, let's make it $200,000 or even $150,000 or $300,000. I don't really mind. But you say what your annual income is and set it at a reasonable rate, right? In the case of Elon Musk, what's interesting is that he's become a trillionaire and he does not take a salary at all, just like Bezos and a bunch of these guys to escape taxes. So this is a bit of a moot point once you get to the higher echelons and they have all these other strategies. But the point is, like, how much money do you have, income do you have disposable to you at any time? And I would say that number is actually remarkably low in these capitalistic societies. And I don't think that the goal should be, okay, let's push it to $1 million or $2 million for the sake of just wanting more. Like, that's greed, right? But if you can now go, okay, what would life lived meaningfully well look like now? Now that I feel very secure, my nervous system is calm, I have 6 months in the bank or 1 year in the bank of if tomorrow my job, like all my businesses all blew up and I didn't make another penny for the next 12 months, I know that I have a bank account somewhere in a high interest savings account that has 12 months worth. It's bought me this insurance policy, right? Unless that bank explodes and then I'm, people have all sorts of strategies for that. But that's mine and that gives me peace of mind. And so after I've built that, now I go, okay, yes, I have to invest in like my pension because I don't have one as an expat, and I have to think about how much I need for retirement, and that's kind of running in the background. But any extra that I'm doing, this should go towards building a meaningful life. And saving for my retirement, it doesn't really add meaning to my life. And so I think it's different for everyone, but you really have to get wise, and I think you do probably in your 20s and 30s, of what really drives you, what creates happiness for you.
I agree.
And I think for a lot of people, that's family, right? For some people, it's legacy. That's been something I've been tinkering with. For me, it's about connections. It's about relationship. And so I don't know why it took so long. I can't remember what the other one was, wealth and network. But to me, maybe it was because the definition of wealth for me is it's not about financial wealth. To me, wealth is about like meaningful wealth. And to me, relationships fall into that as well. So I think you need to get clear on that. Like another thing for me is travel. I love to travel. So that's something that I know there's some people that are like, I hate to travel. I never want to leave my house. Cool. We're two different people. But find out what are those things that really up your energy, that excite you, YOLO, right? You only live once. You're here for a reason. I really believe that. And I don't think it's just to work. And like, I don't even think it's about like just raising kids, right? There is a purpose that you have for why you're here. And it's your job in your lifetime to find out what that is, what your special skills are, what the things that really excite you are, and then contribute to the world in that way. So I think that's a personal responsibility each of us have. And money and capitalism is just one facet of a resource that can help you on that journey.
Sure. I agree 100%. Wealth can mean very different things for very many different people.
Yeah.
Do you feel wealthy?
I do, actually. Yeah. Like I was talking to you about this earlier. But to be honest, as I think back, like because of maybe a lot of my experiences, even when I was not wealthy from like, let's say a purely financial point of view, I always felt wealthy. Because if you have an experience like going to West Africa and realizing how you're wealthier than the wealthiest family on the block there, you're like, oh, my perspective has changed. And so even when I was also telling you my first year out of college, I didn't realize I was on the poverty line until I filed for my taxes. And then they basically said, you don't have to pay the fee for this because you're on the poverty line. Until I realized that, because they told me, I didn't really feel impoverished. I was living paycheck to paycheck and I was struggling, some months. But yeah, I felt wealthy at the time because my personal life was abundant. I had a great relationship. I had so many great friends, and I felt like I was doing really meaningful work that I was like obsessed with. I was like I still to some degree am a workaholic, but work gave me a lot of drive and purpose. And so these are all things that really filled me up, and I feel like I'm someone that feels quite full most days.
Erika, you have done so much in 40 years of your life.
Yeah, crazy.
What's next for you?
What is next? I've been thinking about this because of the 40-year milestone. I have two businesses. I'm also I'm a little bit in the spirituality space, and numerology wise, I'm apparently coming up on my year 9. So next year at 41 will be a closing of a 9-year cycle for me. And so that's been sort of on my mind of like, what do I think is closing and what might be opening up?
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? What do you mean by the cycle? Yeah,
so if you look into numerology, and some people might say it's like a cousin to astrology, for example, this sort of method of thinking believes that there are 9-year cycles, and it's a very easy calculation. So if you take your birthday, so mine's February 23rd, February being 2, right? And 23rd, 2 and 3. You add those together, 2 plus 2 plus 3. So that's 7. And then this year, 2026, is 2 plus 2 plus 6, right? 2026. And that's 10. So 7 plus 10 is 17. And you want to get a number between 1 and 9. So if it's 17, you add 1 plus 7, and you end up with the number 8. And that means I'm in the 8th year of a 9-year cycle.
Okay.
This is supposed to be my year of money and power. Okay, it's the year 8. And you can look it up. You can Google it, and you can find out what each year means. But next year, year 9 is the final of this 9-year cycle. And if you look back on your life, you might find that there's these chapters that roughly last about 9 years. And as I've started diving into this only in the last few years, I'm like, wow. I definitely have met all of the great loves of my life. Not that everybody has to, but in the year of love and marriage. And yeah, I've kind of dove into this as a way of like dissecting my life and seeing if it works. I'm totally open to all of this stuff. And so because I have this year 9 looming, part of it is a little bit fearful, right? Like, what am I closing? What feels like it's dying and losing energy? And one of my businesses, which is more in the consulting realm, it doesn't feel like it's completely dying, but it feels like it's dying in the form that it's dying. So I was mostly consulting with Fortune 500 companies, CEOs, CMOs, looking at growth strategies to enter into new markets in Asia. And it's not that Asia is not a great market. It is not that I don't have an amazing, stellar team, but two things. The world is changing. In the world of AI, I think a lot of companies no longer need to, we've seen McKinsey and BCG and all these big consulting firms have a big cull. They're firing all of their analysts and consultants because in the age of general AI, you can do a lot of this work. I'm amazed how much of this work you can do in a fraction of the time. You just basically need one smart strategy consultant or a partner, and then they can use Gen AI in your company with maybe 1 or 2 analysts to support, and you could probably do like 100 projects a year, when in the past you could probably only do like 10. So in that way, that business is sort of dying out. But my expertise has also changed to helping startups and fundraising. And so I'm getting a lot more gigs on boards advising startups on, how to do capital raising, how to go about fundraising, whether they should even be doing that. And supporting them in initiating and creating new businesses. So I see that coming along the way. And then my own tech startup as well has gone through shifts with the war going on, which now hopefully complete in the region. We've gone through some ups and downs, but I see us growing and innovating and pivoting like we've always been doing. And I think the next 10 years is a lot about balance. It's about balancing these businesses, all of the passion projects that I have, the podcasts that I host, I'm still doing a lot. And I'm still, at 40, I really want to get back into the physical shape. Maybe not that I was as a college athlete, but yeah, really taking a lot of these things and my social relationships and also giving back. So a lot of mentorship and this sort of thing, or even just jumping on podcasts and supporting in any way that I can. So I think that's the thread that's going into the future.
If tomorrow, me and you, we both die, what message do you have for the world?
I will leave you with a message that my friend Rodrigo in Costa Rica gave me when I was 14. I was there on like a Scouts Canada sort of development project, and he took out his wallet and he's like, and we've been close friends ever since I was 14 years old. I think he was 16. He was our translator, Spanish translator. And he's like, my brother gave this to me. Check this out. And it was a tiny little written note that said, live the life you love and love the life you live. And I have lived my life to that mantra ever since. And I think that's our responsibility. And especially, I don't have kids, but if you do have kids, I think that that's so important, because I have parents that I'm glad to say now are finally living their lives for themselves instead of for their kids or for their ailing grandparents or parents or something like that. And it is such a relief to see them happy. And it's not something you can give to anyone else. You really have to say, what's a life that I would really love to live? And then go out and make that happen. So live the life you love and love the life you live.
That's beautiful. Erika, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. If you found this conversation valuable, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to check out our other videos for more inspiring conversations and practical insights.